Hi, welcome to the presentation today. We are learning about flower reproduction. So we are just going to jump right in. I'll hit present. Flower reproduction. Flower reproduction is essentially you've got different parts of the flower. You've got the anthers, which represent arguably the penis of the flower. Then we've also got the stigma, and that is the equivalent of the arguably vagina of the flower, the female parts, and then the male parts. So the anthers are on top of the stamens, and they split open, and that's where the pollen comes from. So that is argued to be the male gametes. I think there's a slide on it later, but the male gametes, and they pollinate the stigma in the center. So um, that's kind of a little more in depth than what we've got on the slide, but let's keep going. So we're going to start the presentation kind of looking at different types of stamen. There are innumerable models for this. It's um, a pretty fascinating thing to look at, actually, the stamen, because they are all different, all shapes and sizes, and there are so many different types of flowers out there that you could probably continue studying this for years and years and years and never get bored. So it's very, very cool. Well, on the left, we've got a picture that has the stamen kind of lining up around this giant center piece that I believe that would be like the stigma element. But the stamen on the outside, you can see that they have just a little bit of pollen on the outside. So the second photo has is really cute. It's a very small flower, and it almost looks like a gift. It's got, I believe, that green in the center is the ovary, and then you've got the stamen that are kind of wrapping around the ovary, and then they're creating like a little gift. And then they've got the anthers on the top. They did get blurred in this photo, but you've got the anthers on the top. So very cool. Then the third photo we've got here has stamen, and they are just all over. It looks like if they're bent and they're curved, and they are just kind of wild. So it kind of spans the gamut here, what you've got in way of the stamen. Now these are some photos that actually have the pollen on them. So in the first photo, you can see the stamen on the outside there's an actual anther there, and you've got some yellow, just little balls are the pollen. And the base, I believe, is the ovary there, the ovum. If you look up flower diagrams, you'll actually see a number of different labels. That different people may use. The stigma I've seen called the stigmata, and there are just all sorts of different terms. So stamen seems really relatively consistent, as does anthers. So that is reassuring. But so you see the pollen. The second picture also has the pollen just on the top there and kind of crumbling down. It's clumping. The third, a very light colored pollen there, and you can see that it has the two lobes that is common with the anthers. And again, the pollen is the equivalent of the sperm or the male gametes. The female equivalent is in the ovary. So of the egg, the ovum is in the ovary. So this is another picture of another anther that just had that nice definition of the two lobes. That is pretty common with flowers. to have the two lobes, but you can see different models that have different styles of anthers, and the anthers can be on the stamen at different angles and in different ways, and there are different terms for that as well. But this is just a kind of a zoom in on one particular anther that this one doesn't look to have too much in way of pollen on it, but you can see in the background, I believe that's probably the ovary there, another stamen right there. So this is an example. Apologies, I'm going to move. And this is the flower that we're looking at under the microscope here. So we just saw the first photo, which is the anther on the stamen with the ovary in the background here. And then we've got I believe that is another anther covered in pollen. And then we also see these middle filaments here, and they've got these little fingers outstretched on them, probably to collect the the pollen. And I believe that that would be the equivalent then of the stigma of the female part leading down into what's up here, which is the ovary. This is the ovary here. So I'm presuming that these are the equivalent of like the plant's vagina um, or stigmata. It all depends on what terms you are familiar with, but then this I actually did crack open the ovary. I was curious, and so this is what you might see. And so these are going to be seeds one day, or they're going to turn. I don't think this particular plant fruits, so I think that it will probably turn into seeds. But pretty cool to see it, all the different steps: the flower, and the anther, the pollen, and then the receptacles for that pollen to lead directly down into the ovary and what's inside the ovary. Very, very cool. So we already kind of brushed on this a little bit. The pollination of the flower can lead to the formation of a berry or a fruit that contains seeds, or just seeds themselves. And this comes in many different shapes and sizes, which we have a few examples here. Examples of berries. These are honeysuckle, so they're nice and plump, and they're primarily water. These ones are thicker, and they are tougher to squish and to get the seeds out. These are also pretty squishy like the honeysuckle, except this has a giant pit on the inside. These are chokecherries, so this has a large pit, whereas these have maybe 2 or 3 little small seeds inside. And we actually do have pictures of the seeds here. So this is actually very small. Like I said, 2 or 3 of these could be in um, one honeysuckle berry. This just has the one center pit, and then the chokecherry also has the one center pit here. So there are also seed pods. This one is from bird's foot trefoil, and this is what is inside of the pods, just little green ones. And I'm not sure that these were 100% ripe, so these might actually turn brown or black as they are fully mature. I just wanted to have the photo available for this presentation, so I grabbed them. And the pods do look mature, but they haven't turned brown or started popping open on their own. But you have little seeds like that inside of these. And this is actually the pod from wood sorrel. And so you get a bunch of little seeds like this. And the white is actually like a protective sheath on the brown seeds. And so once the brown seeds dry, or once they become more mature, that white material will actually fall off. And so that is what that is there. But pretty cool. I like the pods. They are actually related to legumes, which it has been posited that legumes can help fix nitrogen, which could help with our greenhouse gas emissions, nitrogen capture. Versus say like the carbon capture. So more research. I can't corroborate that because I don't have any sort of equipment to test gases, and I've got a microscope, but it's it doesn't see. I don't know that it would see the microbiota that would um, help with that exchange. It's not an electron microscope. It's pretty basic. So very cool though, very interesting. There are also naked seeds. This one actually has a helicopter like a dandelion, but it is naked. It's just at the bottom here. If you are to clean this seed, like for selling or for using in conservation efforts, a lot of places will remove this helicopter element. It is not actually necessary if you are planting the seeds yourself, but in nature, that helicopter helps those seeds to spread and they catch in the wind and then they'll proliferate in other places. So, but that is the seed right at the bottom there. It doesn't really have a sheath or any sort of protective coating on it. These ones are, I believe this was a lesser trefoil, and it's just got the seeds kind of in a bunch, right, kind of right where the flowers are almost, or the flower is at the top here, but you might have another bloom come off, but it's got the leaves here, so they're relatively unprotected. I actually did a separate presentation or a separate graphic that has more information about those particular seeds, but there might be just a small layer of protection on that, like a green, natural material, something thin, and these actually do turn black with time. So over time, they appear drier and then they do turn black. So these ones are another clover-esque type, but obviously they do not appear to be traditionally in the legume family like you might see here. But it's got just seeds right on the stem, right up the stem. Or well, I think these are actually, I was looking at this the other day, and I don't think it was like the big stem, like the primary stem, but I think it's all of the branches branching out from that primary stem. So they're just right by those leaves, which is pretty interesting, especially since it's got such this, the small little leaves, and um, they look very comparable to these seeds, but they are different, as you can see, because they're not grouping in the same way. There are other seed types too. I believe this is pennycress. So it's got the seed with the floaty material around to help it catch in the wind. Then we've got the helicopters, this type of helicopter, not the fluff ones, but I think this was maybe, I did have to look up just how many different types of trees have this type of seed. So this might actually have been an elm. I snapped the picture and I forgot to pay close attention to what the leaves themselves looked like. But if you are familiar with those, they will kind of float to the ground and it helps them to spread as well. So this is actually a hazelnut. So these will actually, there's a nut on the inside of these that will kind of turn brown over time. But I saw this and I was just so curious. What is this? What is this? Because I didn't know it was a hazelnut at the time. And I was sure that it was the nut or the seed, but I didn't know. And so it's interesting how it's got those, they almost look pointy, probably to deter predators from eating them. And they are edible. Obviously, we eat hazelnuts, in Nutella, and they're in all sorts of sweet goodies. And so hazelnut is not uncommon. So this is very cool. And this was actually in Minnesota as well. So we do grow these in Minnesota. There was a movement actually to try and promote the growth of more hazelnuts in Minnesota. And I actually would like to try them raw. Um, and I've not gotten the opportunity yet, but I know where I can find some now, where I can harvest some. So that's pretty cool. And this one actually was probably one of the coolest seeds I had ever seen when I found this. And this is a sweet gum seed. And I saw this in Missouri, the state of Missouri. So these are all Minnesota, and this is Missouri. But I just thought it was too cool. And so I actually picked one up off the ground that had already um, turned brown, and it was kind of um, it had more holes in it. But it's so cool. So this is a very fascinating study to see the different varieties of how these plants can grow and what their seeds look like, and then how the babies will transform over time too. So we got the little button plants, and then they grow, and you can have different phases. So, but that's a different presentation. The maturity from the original reproductive efforts. Um, and then uh, this is just a note. Some plants can self-pollinate while others do not. So some have both the male parts and the female parts on one plant. Others are all female, while others are all male. And some just need to have that connection with a secondary plant. So the more you know. Any questions? Like I said, it's a pretty short presentation today, but just a basic little blurb on flower reproduction. Questions? All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and we will end it there. Thank you so much.